to record it. I was hoping to use some of this for our newscast. So if that could be enabled, that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Okay. So we will move on to our third item on the agenda, which is consideration of the minutes from special and emergency meetings on May 21st, June 3rd, June 16th, and July 9th, 2020. And I would consider a motion in the hopes that we can take those en suite together.
I make a motion we approve those 4 minutes.
Thank you. A motion and a second. Do we have any comments or corrections from anyone on any of those sets of minutes? I do not see any indication of comments. Therefore, Jonathan, if you could call the roll, vote.
Yes, Kevin?
Yes.
Irene?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Sophie?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes, thank you. Okay, next item up is our asset management report. George Aronson puts this together on a quarterly basis for us, and it covers many items and issues, as he'll give you a summary, including update on our custody account, tip fee and operating budget stabilization funds, our cash collateral account, reserve fund update, second quarter joining member cash distributions, among other things. George.
Thank you, Karen. And again, we do this every quarter, as we have for as long as the MRC has had assets, full disclosure of the joint venture financial status. I think up front, the letter, and just for those who may be unfamiliar, there's text up front and then the financial statements out back in tables 1 through 3. I just thought it was important to highlight that the impacts, or 3 categories of impacts, of the suspension of operations of the coastal facility on May 28th, stopped accepting MSW from the joining members, and became unable to fulfill its contractual obligations. And at that time, the 3 that are pointed out in the letter are, first of all, the MRC had provided Coastal with a short-term bridge loan for $1.5 million on the expectation that it would be repaid by June 15th from the proceeds of the anticipated additional financing. The additional financing was not available, and Coastal did not repay the $1.5 million loan. So that's one of the items that's a direct impact of the suspension of operations. The second is that the MRC, rather than Coastal, is now managing the diversion of MSW away from joining members to alternative backup disposal facilities, which means it's the MRC and not Coastal that's collecting tip fees from joining members and paying disposal costs to the operators of the backup facilities. Naturally, and in any operation of this sort, there are some lead and lag times. What we're trying to do in terms of an accounting perspective is to recognize the expenses when the waste crosses the scale, because we know what the bill will be, even if we haven't received the invoice. And so the financials recognize that based on tonnage and tip fees rather than on invoices received. And we recognize the revenues received when they show up on the bank statement. And we know what will be receivable because, again, we know what happens when the tonnage crosses the scale. We want to match that accurately with the expenses. So the joint venture is recognizing receivables and payables in that way. And you'll see numbers that are a little bit different from the way the MRC administrative numbers are shown by Layton and Longton, but I just wanted to make sure that we understood what the numbers in the joint member asset financials statements look like. And then the third is that upon suspension of operations for various reasons that have been discussed in prior meetings, the MRC exercised its rights under the site lease to secure the condition of the facility in order to facilitate restart resumption of operations if needed. and to ensure, but basically to ensure that the facility stays in compliance with applicable permits and licenses of the Maine DEP. More discussion of that to come, but that costs some money. And to the extent that costs are incurred, they're recognized as payable even in the advance of receiving invoices, because we know what the costs are. And we want to recognize costs as soon as they're incurred. Some of those costs, there are various agreements to reimburse, and we'll talk about that going forward. So I think those are the three impacts. If you look at the balance, I think the other thing to say is that because of these impacts, we're using the funds in some new ways, which the letter notes. Everything having to do with collection of tip fees from the members and paying of disposal fees to the backup disposal facilities is in a segregated account, the MRC operating budget stabilization account, which was an account that had a fairly low balance but was still in existence. So those activities from a financial point of view are segregated from the other activities. Just to keep that straight, there are a lot of towns paying tip fees and multiple backup disposable costs, and so we want to make sure that those are localized so they can be matched. There also is always a startup working capital requirement there we'll talk about in a little bit. The second change is that the costs, again, in the past when we've had facility related costs, they've ultimately come out of the tip fee stabilization fund, put through transfers to the custody account, and then paid out of the custody account. And we're doing that again for the costs related to securing the facility and complying with the DEP permit requirements. The custody account had previously been used and continues to be used for distributions to the joining members, but that's a fairly straightforward exercise, and so we can track that fairly well. But again, just to make sure we're keeping track of the new costs in a way that makes it easy to and transparent and auditable by our auditor. And finally, the operating account is used for administrative and operating costs of the MRC as opposed to the joint venture. And we've always tried to be very careful about noting transfers from the joint venture accounts in the MRC operating account. So I think that's the overview of some of the changes that we've had to go through to manage funds in light of the events since May 28th and a little bit before that. So I can stop at this point for specific questions about procedures, and then I'll just say a few words about what's on table 1 and 2, which are the financials and some of the specific transactions. I'm happy to proceed as well. So just to run down where we are in the big picture of things, the numbers are as of the end of the quarter, which is the practice here. Again, those who are in the Finance Committee meeting might have seen some reports with different end dates. These are as of close of business June 30th, start of business July 1st, 2020. The custody account had about $225,000. There's still a little bit of residual money in the Bangor Savings Bank custody account. That money had been moved over. There's some residual interest that still needs to be moved. You'll see a new item, accounts receivable. So the $487,000 of tip fees receivables from joining members for MSW, that's based on tonnage times tip fees minus what was actually received in the quarter. And there's a little more detail of that in the narrative. And similarly, at the end of the quarter, there had been an agreement on reimbursement from bondholders for certain of the trustee or of the cost of securing the facility. And in fact, the first payment was received early in July. So that's shown as a payable reimbursement receivable. There are continuing discussions on how those arrangements will work, but they haven't risen to the point at this point where as of July 1st or as of June 30th, they would meet the requirements to be considered a receivable. The investments. and
George?
again- Question?
George, can you just provide that amount that we're anticipating right now for receiving from the bondholders for the public's benefit?
Yeah, we've sent them an invoice for 30,000, just under $30,000 for the next round. There's some discussion ongoing of those costs. So it's there's still there are ongoing discussions related to that.
So, but the total receivable or amount that we've anticipated receiving from them so far to date is 130,000?
The 130 was received. The 30,000 refers to an invoice that was sent in July, so it doesn't show up in the second quarter.
Very good. So total 160 or so to date.
You're right.
Yes.
That's what's been invoiced, and again, there are ongoing discussions there as to how that will be managed, and some of the numbers may move around.
Thank you.
In terms of balances, investments, we heard that the number in the TIFI stabilization account is about, which is held by, again, for the joint venture, is 6.355 plus another 20,000 in accrued income, so making about 6.37 million. The operating budget stabilization account had a balance of 33,000. There was an infusion of cash to start that process, and we're going to need some more working capital just because as we start this process, we're learning what the real leads and lags are in terms of when the tip fees come in and when the payments are due. Payments seem to be due a little bit before the tip fees come in, and we'll need to manage that with some working capital, which will come back over time, but it does need to be funded. The cash collateral account has a total value of about $1.512 million, of which some of which includes accrued income as of June 30th. The promissory note is shown still at $1.5 million on the balance sheet, and there's about $57,000 in accrued interest and cost reimbursements that have not yet been repaid. That's the end of June 30th number. And finally, the value of the Hamden site as improved is shown on the books as $6.2 million, giving total assets of about $16.5 million. The other side, there's a lot of detail on what's payable. The key payables are the distribution, which again is an obligation of the MRC under the adjournment agreement, and the MRC is going to meet that obligation, assuming the board approves the transfer. So that's 141,312.70. In addition, there are some payables that were, or amounts that were payable as of June 30th related to securing the facility. And the big one is the $324,000 in tip fees payable to disposal facilities as of June 30th. Again, this is based on tons over the scale in the tip fees. If you look at the actual invoices, they tend to lag when the expense is incurred. So we want to make sure we incur the expense and show that on the balance sheet, even if there's a delay in receiving the invoice, and it's net of the amounts that have been paid in the quarter. What that gives us is a statement of net position of about just under 16 million. Last quarter, it was about 16.7. So we've seen a drop of about 700,000 or 800,000. What is it? 67. Yeah, close to $800,000. Much of that is related to funds that were transferred either to secure the facility to comply with the EP or to fund the tip fee or to manage the tip fee and disposal payment process. The MRC, obviously, to the extent that there are costs for which there are claims, or for either for reimbursement or against coastal, we would look for those costs to be reimbursed going forward. So I think that's the overview of the financials. Maybe I'll stop for questions at this point and then get into the recommendations.
Does anybody have any questions for George? No? Okay.
Okay.
Go on.
Okay, I'll keep going. There are basically 4 recommendations in the letter. The first is, again, the joinder agreements include an obligation to distribute funds to joining members over the first 36 months after the commercial operation date. And that number is calculated in table 3 is 141,312.70. That reduces the effective net disposal cost by $5 a ton for joining members that were equity charters and $3 a ton for the joining members that were new charters or aren't. So that's first recommendation. Typically, we've funded that by a transfer of $125,000 per quarter from the TIP fee stabilization fund, which holds money that was set aside for what was called the target value reserve fund in the joinder agreement. So the second recommendation is to move 125. Generally, that number has been a little bit higher. The transfer has been higher. This month it's a little lower because second quarter was a little higher tonnage month. And generally, we're within, I don't know, $10,000 or $15,000 cumulatively of where we would be. So again, the $1.5 million over 36 months was an allowance. When we get closer to the end of the 36-month period, we can the board may be placed of a question whether the allowance was sufficient or whether there needs to be additional transfers. But for now, the recommendation is to stay on the policy of transferring $125,000 a quarter for that purpose. If that's clear. The third and fourth are related to working capital. The third is a recommendation to transfer up to $300,000 from the TIP fee stabilization fund to the operating budget reserve stabilization fund as working capital for payment of disposal fees in advance of collection of TIP fees. We don't want to get behind. We want to keep our disposal service providers current. And to do that, the MRC will need to pay them before the MRC collects the TIP fees. We're looking at a number up to $300,000. And that would be the recommendation when the specific transfer comes. I presume that would be delegated to the treasurer or appropriate officer to figure if the entire $300,000 is needed. Again, we're still learning about how quickly individual municipalities pay and what it takes to run the invoicing process. And the fourth, which I think Michael will be addressing later, is to provide a number of $250,000 from the TIP fee stabilization fund to the MRC operating account to cover MRC operating and administrative expenses. And again, this is a recommendation that Michael and I talked through based on the fact that, and this was discussed in a number of places at Finance Committee this morning, that the MRC is incurring additional administrative and some operating costs out of its operating fund that need to be funded. To the extent that they result in claims or might be reimbursed, that money will come back. But in the meantime, it needs to be funded, and the number that we're looking at is $250,000. So we realize this is a significant transfer. $675,000 is of 2, 3, and 4 from the TIP fee stabilization fund. But we live in, I will say, extraordinary times, and these are the numbers that we're recommending to the board at this point. So with that, I'm happy to take questions on any aspect of any of the discussion.
Is there any board member that has a question? Bob?
Yeah, regarding the 300,000 proposed transfer from TIP fee stabilization to the operating budget reserve stabilization fund to cover the cost of paying for disposal in advance before we get the money from the member communities. Would there be any objection, George, to recording that as a receivable from as a liability to the TIP fee stabilization fund, and then as an asset, as a current asset, simply describing that it's there as an operating stabilization account, so that they offset one another in accounting terms, and we can keep track of whether or not the liability is growing or staying the same over the period that we're involved in.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think that when, at this level of reporting, those funds are both assets of the joint venture so that they're reported on a consolidated basis. So we haven't done that in the past because ultimately the offsetting assets and liabilities are eliminated during consolidation anyway. So it's not going to show up on table 1 or table 2, but it will show up in the records underlying table 1 and table 2. I think part of what you're getting to, and maybe this is a bigger discussion, is that right now we're doing some things for the first time we haven't done before, and we don't really have a significant investment policy governing how those are recorded and tracked because they're new transactions. So I think what I'm going to do, I've noted your comment, and I think we need to track that. So it's not going to show up necessarily in the consolidated reporting, but it should show up in our ongoing reporting so we know where we are. And I think, and then when we codify investment policy, we can make sure that that's made more official. Does that make sense, or do you have comments on that?
Yeah, it makes sense to me because we don't see the consolidated report very often, but we would see the operating and the balance sheet for the MRC every month, and that allows us to track it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, George. Any other comments or questions? Sophie?
Take a motion that we move the asset management recommendations.
I'll second that. We're not hearing you, Karen.
Sorry. That was a motion and a second to move and accept the asset management report and its recommendations. And if Jonathan would call the roll, please.
Yeah, sure. Kevin,
Yes.
Irene,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Tony,
Aye.
and Karen.
Yes. Thank you. And I would also like to point out and ask Mike, now that the asset management report has been accepted, if we could make sure that gets up on the MRC website along with all the other quarterly asset management reports under the documents
Yes.
section, accounting records. Thank you.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have the treasurer's report, including consideration of financial statements, current bills payable, and second quarter budget reconciliation. I'll hand it off to Sophie, our treasurer.
Thank you, Karen. I will tell you that was the most widely attended finance committee meeting I have ever run. Most of the people sitting on this meeting already lived through the finance committee meeting, so I'm going to try to do this very quickly. But we reviewed the financials and the reconciled second quarter reconciled budget report. We are 51% of our revenue has been collected, and we have expended 77% of our budget. That includes $185,000 that was allocated to all of the work that we are currently doing on the project. So just keep that in mind. We have $8.2 million on hand. And we have bills totaling $72,215.41 that I would like permission to pay. Oh, and we got our investment update. We actually were ahead on the tip fee stabilization account, which is about $6.4 million. For the year, we were at 1.59% growth, which is so small, but it's green and not red. And our goals that we gave the financial advisor is to maintain short-term and liquidity. Did I do all right, Bob?
Yes, we're spot on.
That's what I've got.
Does anybody have any questions for Sophie? If not, we'll accept a motion to accept the treasurer's report and to approve the bills payable.
So moved.
So moved.
I'll take that as a motion to end a second. Jonathan, call the roll, please.
Kevin,
Yes.
Irene,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
and Karen.
Yes, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a report from our executive director, Mike. Give us a little update on where we're at. Lots has happened. I know you've been a busy, busy man, so fill us in a little bit.
Thank you, Karen. So we'll start with the plant status. Things are in good shape at Coastal. All the waste has been removed and disposed of properly. We have completed just about everything on the DEP punch list that they have asked us to do to remain in compliance. We are just doing some tidying up and some neating up in the corners here and there. I still have a call with DEP every Monday to update them on plant status and prospect status. DEP also conducts a plant tour every Thursday. The plant is still staffed with a skeleton crew while tours for the facility are being scheduled and loose ends are being tied up. The current staff also have a maintenance schedule that consists of equipment motors being turned to preserve them properly while idle so that everything can be restarted in a timely fashion. Member bypass update. The bypass of MSW going to Perk and Crossroads seems to be going well. I have had a few members call and ask if they could switch locations, but other than that, everything seems to be okay here. I want to remind the members that this is a temporary arrangement while we are focused on getting the plant up and going again. Waste Management, the Crossroads landfill site, had exclusivity to all of this waste and was generous enough to allow the MRC to send 3/4 of the contracted waste to Perk. This was a significant revenue loss for Crossroads, but they felt it was the right thing to do. With that said, members must follow the bypass directions they have been given and use the location they have been directed to use. There remains in effect an existing contract with Waste Management, and we need not to violate that contract. Next, new partner or investors for Coastal Resources update. We're in a very good position right now, having made encouraging progress. Last time we spoke, we were casting a very wide net looking for prospects. Now we have 4 entities that have expressed serious interest in writing. They've signed non-disclosure agreements and are doing their due diligence before making formal proposals. I am aware that 2 of these entities have already reached out to the Bondholders Council via phone to introduce themselves. We have a number of criteria a candidate must meet before we make any recommendations. Among them are processes and willing to commit to financial resources to restart the plant, has the required technical and operating qualifications on their team, must have management on site, will restart in a way that achieves diversion goals, pledges not to raise the tip fees. This is real exciting news for the MRC members and seems to be moving to the next level. This is why it is very important, more important than ever, why members should remain in with the MRC. The supply of 115 towns is desirable for new investors. Municipalities are stronger together. There is more capacity than there is supply of MSW. If towns split up now, they won't have the negotiating leverage that they have as a single block via MRC. Towns on their own will pay more for MSW disposal. I want to thank the members for all their patience and remind them that we are stronger in numbers, and we are starting to see a lot of things starting to happen with the plant. Thank you. That's all I have for a report, Karen.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions from anyone on the board? Yes, Sophie.
So, first, I want to just recognize the incredible work that Mike is doing, not only on the ground, but he's keeping 9 very headstrong people aware of what's going on, and he's able to synthesize all of what we're saying. I also would echo just that I really appreciate what Waste Management and PERC have done coming to the table to help us in this period of time. I also would just want it to be really clear that it feels like we're doing an awful lot here. We have kind of been the bank of MRC, and I think it's important for people to understand that every one of our decisions around expending money or where we're going to put our time and energy has been weighed against the benefit for the entire group. And I think it's important for those who could come to the table and help us with this project to understand that MRC's primary focus is meeting the needs of our members. And it is not necessarily ensuring a specific project or process happen. And I feel like Mike is starting to communicate that, but might need some support from the board so that other people understand that that is in fact the case as well.
Thank you, Sophie. Well stated. I think you speak for many, if not all of us on the board on those points. Any other comments from anyone? And I would strongly echo the thanks and the gratitude that we have for the incredible work that Mike is doing and the effort that he's putting in to ensure a successful outcome for our members. I really appreciate that. So moving on from that, we next up is an update on the Harold Bouchard Way Road, which, as people will recall, was a an infrastructure funded by the MRC as part of the development of the site. And we're working on having that road and infrastructure accepted by the town of Hampden. So we're looking for an update. I believe that's you, Mike, to start.
Yes, I'll take care of that. So over the last several weeks, month and a half, we've been meeting with CES in the town of Hampden to see if we can get the road and the pump station turned over. We were given a punch list to complete that we had sergeants take care of. Those items have been completed down to fixing the tar was raised a little bit where they had the repairs. Some shrubs need to be replanted in the drainage basins, and yellow lines need to be painted again and swept. So that whole punch list is done. I've met with Hampden, and Tony has been part of these meetings and helped me along with these things. And due to a line that they have there, it's a very large line, and they're worried about that line getting septic with not enough water flow through it. So it looks like they're probably going to be able to put this on their I just spoke with them yesterday on their agenda for Monday's meeting to take the road and the pump station over, with the understanding they're sending me 2 documents, and my understanding those 2 documents will have a contingency. One contingency will be on the road while it's a waste facility, processing facility down at the end of the road. There will be some requirements to put a sweeper on this road, to sweep this road every so often. I don't know how often they're going to request, but that the road has to be swept outside of their normal maintenance plan for the road. And the other is, while there's not the minimum flow of water going through this 8-inch line, they will provide what they feel needs to be the minimum flow. And while that line is idle, then we will be required to flush that line to keep it from getting septic. Now, the requirement, I had asked for the minimum flow because as the industrial park gets developed, then the flow should go up. So they're just concerned of the size of the line that was put in and with coastal not flowing water through it. So Hampden told me I should be seeing these I guess you call them contingencies on this, which I will run them through Tony, of course. And if he feels at that point it needs to go beyond that level, then I'm sure he will forward it on. But it looks like this thing will probably happen next Monday from after talking to Paula And I don't see anything. I think what they've asked is reasonable, in my opinion, on the water flow and on sweeping of the road. So that's what I have to report on the road.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. And thank you too to Tony for helping marshal this through. It's been a long journey, and we appreciate the efforts of the town of Hampden to consider it for acceptance. And we're looking forward to getting that resolved and turned over to the city.
And as usual, Mike has done the heavy lifting on this.
Yeah, well, but we appreciate your participation in it and oversight and your expertise that you put towards it to help think through the challenges that we faced.
Thank you.
So do we need to consider any action by the board with regard to those contingency documents? I don't know if you know that, Mike, or if we need to ask Jonathan about that.
I think that need to be a Jonathan question.
Yeah, at this moment in time, we don't have those documents, so it's unclear precisely what they're going to say. I guess it would be a board preference if the board felt comfortable authorizing folks to agree to those contingencies based upon terms and conditions in their judgment they find in the best interest of MRC in a form acceptable to MRC's legal counsel. You could do that right now. Or alternatively, if you wanted to wait to see the documents, you could do it then. I think it might be more of a timing consideration. If we're expecting that process to go forward prior to the next board meeting, you may want to have that authorization vote now. If not, then you could certainly wait.
Sophie, do you have a question?
Well, it's not a question, it's a statement. I'm a little bit concerned, not in the capacity or technical advice that we would get from Tony, our engineers, our legal counsel, or Mike, but rather in the fact that sometimes in our zest to get things done, there can be long-term implications or ways that things are worded that other people would read in a way that people who are in the midst of the negotiation may have a different understanding of. That has come back to bite us a couple of times. And I would think a community, if somebody came to my town and was trying to resolve something and we needed to give conditional approval, based on agreements, if those agreements weren't given to us, if I didn't get those agreements out months in advance, I would expect to make a conditional approval based on those agreements being negotiated and executed. So I don't think it's really fair to say it's going to be on the docket next Monday, but we haven't seen anything, but we now need to rush because we might get something that we then have to approve in time to be able to get them to accept the road that we've been trying to get them to accept for quite a while. I would much prefer having the town base its acceptance on the execution of an agreement, but I'd like to see the agreement because I don't want to be on the hook for something long-term that is that's going to cost us money that is going to come back to bite us later, I guess is my long-winded way of expressing my concern.
Perhaps a point of clarification. So, Mike, when you say there's a meeting on Monday, is that a committee meeting of the town or a town council meeting?
I'm not sure on that. I had talked to Paul yesterday and she had mentioned that they were drafting up what we would need to see, and then they were meeting on Monday and they were going to try to get it to me as soon as possible.
A suggestion, I suppose, I suspect that the board will be meeting sometime soon in August anyway. And my recollection is that the town of Hampden typically has a committee process before it reaches the council. Given Sophie's comment, which I think is a very fair comment, And the fact that we're meeting more often, I think it's probably something that we could wait if the board, if that was a pleasure of the board. So if you wanted to do it now, you could, I think, but it sounds like timing wise, there'll be another board meeting if we have something to consider for action that might have a little bit more concrete detail to it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Tony, did you have a question?
I agree with Sophie, and John makes some good points. We've been meeting more often. It's been a long, arduous process. I don't think there's a need for us to ramp up the speed of our review of the documents that may, as Sophie's indicated, come back to bite us as we've done in the past. So I have no problem waiting to get the documents, review them, and then maybe address them, or not maybe address them on the meeting in August, which I agree with John that we'll be having at some point.
Thanks, Tony. Any other comments from anyone? I support the sentiment as well. I would very much like to have a sense of what the cost implications are, the duration and term of those obligations. I'd like to have also a better sense of our understanding of, what the time frame or, order of events might be with regard to further development of the parcel surrounding the coastal facility, for future development prospects with regard to pump station and all those sorts of things. So I think waiting a few weeks would be a good idea, and hopefully we'll get those draft documents in hand soon, so we have ample time to review them.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Next up, our committee reports. Not sure we've had a ton of activity in our committees, but Mike, maybe you can give us a brief rundown of any of the latest developments.
Yeah, there's really nothing. I just put them on there to let you know that there's really nothing going on. I mean, on the communication side, we're just trying to have the town hall meetings on a regular basis and communicate to our members things that are going on through the constant contact. The newsletter, second quarter newsletter did go out last week. So communications, we seem to be keeping up with. Nothing else really happening on the other committee, on the waste flow or the legislative committee. Nothing really going on there.
All right, thank you. Which does bring us to our next scheduled meeting date right now is a town hall meeting, and that is set for, I believe it's a Wednesday, August 19th at 10 a.m. And again, it'll be a virtual format, and we'll look forward to being able to provide the members and other interested parties an update of the developments at that time. And I guess we right now are scheduled to accept public comments before we're going to go into 2 back-to-back executive sessions, one of which is the annual performance review for our executive director, who has just completed his 1 year with the MRC. He began July 1st, 2019. So we're going to give him a review of the year. We do have one item that's scheduled for consideration after the executive sessions, review of extension letter regarding integral capabilities for performance test protocol. And there is a possibility of additional items as a result of one or both of the executive sessions. But we will consider at this time, if anybody would like to make a public comment, you can indicate your interest in using the chat function, and we will enable your video and audio so that you can provide your comments to us. But in general, while we're waiting to see whether anybody indicates that interest, I would just like to sort of reiterate and elaborate on points that Mike made in terms of our feeling encouraged by the prospects that have come forward to date with regard to additional investors interested in the facility and the prospects for restarting and reopening the plant. We continue to sort of require and move for additional levels of commitment so that we're showing progress towards the plant reopening. So our goal for, within the next few weeks is to find and get to additional levels of interest and commitment from the parties that have already indicated interest or potentially additional parties. So everything is trying to move towards the next level, ensuring folks are truly interested in working with us to reopen the plant. So I don't at this time see anybody interested in making a public comment. I don't know, Jess, if you have any other view that I might not have, but
we do have a couple of questions.
You do, okay.
Yes, yes. One of them is from Paula Scott, and she would like to know if you could speak to the occupancy permit requirements since the conditional permit expired in April, and how does this play into potential new operations?
Mike, are you able to?
I could speak to that. So I've received the documents from Hamden, and I've reached out to Coastal to find out where they were at in these documents. And I spoke to their code enforcement officer. I reached out to him yesterday, and I spoke to their code enforcement officer this morning. I've asked Kevin to also review the documents and have sent him what we've had. So there's a list of items that we're not sure if they were ever resolved. We know some of them weren't definitely resolved, but when it comes to things in the plant on the wet end, we're not sure on that. So it's definitely on the list. It's in with the top 3. Coastal has sent me everything. So there's some stuff on the fire marshal that might be resolved. So they've sent me all the correspondence back on that. CES just sent me this morning stuff on the building permit. There's some issues with the admin office. They have sent me the manufacturer on that and all the correspondence on that. So I'm collecting all the information. This was just brought to our attention, I want to say a couple of weeks ago, and I received a letter on July 13th from them that list all the items. I've reached out to Paula myself to talk to her about it. And like I said, I just talked to the code enforcement office. CES is also working on it with me to get it resolved. I did ask Paula that I told that we would be on top of these items and looking over it. Obviously, it's going to be the tenant's responsibility that comes in there for these items, but I've just asked her for time and to work with us, and she's responded to that, saying that they're willing to work with us to get this stuff taken care of. So it's being worked on, Karen. I mean, and it's moving forward. It hasn't sat idle by no means.
Thank you.
So next we have a question from Brian Sullivan. I have turned his video on and unmuted him. So Brian?
Yeah, Karen just touched on it a little bit, but I was wondering if you could just give me or us a little more information about the timeline that we'll go through to get one of these 4 entities that are interested in the facility in Hamden, what's that's like, and when could it possibly come to fruition if all goes well?
I will give that to either Mike or to George, whoever wants to speak up on that. But I will say that, in terms of the direction that the board has tried to provide is that we understand that, our members are looking for progress. The board is looking for progress. We are not interested in, and we do not have the resources or the capacity to be able to hold the plant in this sort of state of suspension indefinitely, and certainly not longer than a period of a couple months here. So we are really looking for, like I said, more forward progress within the next, 3 to 4 weeks. I am personally hoping for additional milestones that show some progress toward an eventual resolution. I understand from, what we've, heard from our technical consultant, George Aronson, and Mike, who has a lot of experience working with large business development projects like this, that, of course, the actual reopening of a plant could take longer than a few months and will likely take longer than a few months. But what we're looking for is definite forward progress towards a positive outcome. And if we're not seeing that, we as a board are going to need to make difficult choices about what is in the best interest of our members. So, but George or Mike, perhaps you can elaborate on that a little bit further with your expertise.
George, I'll just start, then I'll let you go into the detail. You know, it all depends on whatever and whoever the proposal is. Are they an operator? Are they not an operator? Do they need to bring an operator in? But that is why we do have a skeleton crew there, and we are turning equipment just to make sure that a restart can happen in a very timely fashion, and things don't have to be put back together or you know, re-energized. We're trying to keep everything so it's just preserved and sitting idle right now.
Okay, Mike, first of all, Karen, I thought you did a nice job of outlining the time frame, which is, as of its nature, uncertain, but the order of magnitude is pretty much what we're looking at. Our recommendation is to put a premium on moving fast. We understand that patience is limited and that anything that delays the process is a risk to the process, and we don't want to have undue risk to the process. We want to move forward as quickly as possible. We want to continually see progress and report it. And if there's a point where there is no progress, then the board may have to confront those tough decisions. So we don't want to be in that situation if we don't have to be. That being said, you know, we do have written indications from 4 firms, and we got a few indications of firms that couldn't get a letter in before the board meeting, but might get one in within the next, you know, 24 to 48 hours. Our response to them is, you're already playing catch up, move faster. I mean, there is a process that's, as of its nature, a little bit fuzzy. I think there's some work that needs to be done with the MRC, the bondholders trustee, and some of the other parties to make sure we understand exactly what that process is going to look like and how to make sure it's expeditious and brings about the best possible outcome for a large number of stakeholders. So there's nothing easy about it. On the other hand, I think at this point, we've been into it for a few weeks. We're starting to understand what it looks like. We're having talked to some of the potential proposals. We're starting to understand what their potential concerns are and what some of the hangups might be and what some of the dimensions for selection might be. But again, there's a lot to discuss with a lot of parties, especially the bondholders. I mean, I think that's about all we can say, other than we're encouraged that there's been a lot of interest in a lot of entities, some with quite impressive capabilities and some that can move quite quickly and have experience in the space. So that's the good news, and we'll see how this goes.
Thank you, George and Mike. Brian, any other questions?
I guess so. If there's 4 entities that have expressed interest, and with George at the end, they're saying that maybe there are more than 4 that might submit the formal letter or whatever it is down the line here, or just asking them to go quicker. More than 4, perhaps.
Yeah, that's correct. Some of them are on the call, so hello out there. I think it's nice to see some of them, frankly, attending an MRC board meeting. Again, you know, I think the next step is to identify some of those concrete milestones that need to be achieved and then start getting to those points so that we can get to the point of having a specific preferred proposer that works for everyone and having an understanding among the stakeholders what that process looks like. I'm being a little vague here, but I think that at this point, that's probably an appropriate response.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions, Jess, that you got, or comments?
We do have a question from John Banks. Does the litigation between CRM and NAES have to be resolved before MRC can enter into an agreement with a new operator?
Is that something, John, that you might be able to address?
That's a Jonathan question.
Yeah, so just for clarification, MRC would not be entering into any type of O&M agreement, at least not based on what I understand, you know, could happen. You know, the agreement that where there's a current dispute was between Coastal and the operator at that time. If and when the facility reopens, whoever is the owner, whether it's the same owner or a new owner, and the operator, whoever the new operator may be, you know, that will be up to them to enter into their own agreement. I would not view the current litigation as a barrier for that to happen. That's a contractual dispute at the moment. I would not anticipate that. From MRC's perspective, as was alluded to earlier, our primary interest is making sure that the proper qualifications, technical capabilities, economic, financial wherewithal is in place as part of any reopening.
Thanks, John. And that is a good point to remind folks that MRC here is really acting as a facilitator, that we don't have actual control over, who comes in as the final owner and operator. However, we do have an important role since we do provide the waste that supports the facility. And so our ability to influence that could be potentially, the end of the master waste supply agreement if we disagreed with the approach that, the stakeholders were taking with regard to reopening the plant. But, as always, we're working in the interest of our members, and that interest right now is getting that plant reopening and operating as it was before it shut down, and as we know it can operate. So that is what we're working towards and expending our effort and energy on. And we're working with all parties to make sure that happens to the extent possible. So any others, Jess?
We have one more. This may have already been addressed, but if we could just refresh. Larry Sikora would like to know what might be the anticipated time after contracts are signed before the plant is fully open.
George or Mike?
I'll just say we don't like to know the date, but we don't have that yet. But I think when we were talking about the time frame of a few months, there are a number of open issues. Obviously, a whole lot of things need to get resolved between a large number of parties. And there are entities with experience in this business that are expert at doing that and orchestrating that process. So we're looking to see what they'll tell us. So frankly, we don't have a firm date. We're hoping we can do it within a few months.
Yes, I agree with George. And then depending on whoever that entity is, might be an opportunity to ramp up. So not necessarily that no waste will go in as soon as somebody gets into the facility, but there might be, as they bring in crews and learn the technology and the machinery, there might be a ramp up where we actually have some waste going in, rather than just waiting for a drop dead start date for everything.
Great, thank you.
That was
Was
the
that
last
it then, Jess?
question. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So just a reminder to folks, we're scheduled next to go into 2 back-to-back executive sessions. We will have public comment after those executive sessions and the items that we take up in consideration afterwards, but we are hoping to limit that public comment to the items that we take up as consideration after those executive sessions. So if there's any other further comments, there are public comments that people would like to make, we would ask you to do those now. We're expecting the executive sessions to probably take at least, I would guess, an hour, maybe just shy of an hour. So we are hoping to wrap up this board meeting in or around noontime. That will be our goal. So assuming no other interesting public comments has come forward, Jess, I will take a motion.
Karen?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Tony raised his hand. Tony, do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to thank Jess for her efforts and patience to the run up and preparing for today's meeting.
Oh, you're welcome, Tony.
Yes, thank you. We do appreciate it.
Which are we going into the all panel session right now?
All panelists will be in the first executive session. And I don't know, Jonathan, if it's appropriate for us, is it even allowable for us to take both, make motions for both executive sessions right now at the same time? Or do we do one and then come back out and make motion to go into the second?
Should do them sequentially. So we'll do one first, come back out, then do the second one.
Okay, very good. So I will entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Executive session pursuant to 1 MRS 405, Section 6E to consult with MRC's legal counsel regarding MRC's contractual rights and duties.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Jonathan, if you could call the roll, please.
Kevin,
Yes.
Irene. I don't think you're on mute, Irene.
Bug it.
Oh, while she does that, I'll move on and come back to you. I'll come back to you, Irene. Dana,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Sophie.
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Irene,
Yes.
and Karen.
Yes, thank you. So we are in executive session. What will happen is that all of the panelists will move to a breakout room and conduct its executive session, and then we will return to this forum and then reconvene into our second executive session. So Jess is going to make that magic happen. I believe we're going to actually see a message on your screen, panelists, that ask you if you want to join the breakout room. So we'll see if that happens.
Karen, can we make sure the breakout room is not recorded?
We will make sure the breakout room is not recorded. All right, should get a request to join breakout room number 1 panelists.
all have fun over there. Right, so why didn't it go in
I got pictures on here now.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. Got a picture of them walking around.
Oh, I think Katie showed that from, and then they showed a picture of the guy that found it with the dog.
Officer McCabe. Yeah, he was the heartthrob.
Yeah, he's not a bad looking guy. I agree with you.
You know. Yeah, he was like a teenager.
Is everybody here? Do you want me to make a motion?
That was quick.
Okay.
I think we have a quorum anyway.
So I move we go into executive session per 1 MRS 4056A to conduct executive director performance review.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second. Jonathan, if you would be so call the roll.
Fine.
Kevin,
Hey, we're recording. Oh, we're recording this part. We don't
Yeah.
record. Executive session. Okay.
Irene. Is Irene back in?
Do not see her yet.
I don't see her in yet.
Irene has not left breakout room 1. I'm gonna go in and see if I can take her out.
Okay. Ralph,
Yes.
I don't see Dana back yet.
I should be there.
Oh, there, sorry. Dana,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Sophie.
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
and I think that's it. I don't see Irene in there yet.
Okay.
Can we just leave her in that room and go find her?
I think we can.
Yeah, I don't know. Jess is driving the our functionality, so we got to wait for her to send us our message about which room we're going back to.
So on my Zoom image, I have Jonathan Pottle's body over half of George, or John's head over George's body. It looks kind of funny.
Wow.
Cool.
And I can read
Really
the
exciting.
almost on his desk if my eyes were any better.
There he is.
Yeah, there we go. Mine was Kevin's. Kevin's head was on George's body.
Oh.
Uh,
Yeah, there you go.
John. My eyesight's pretty bad, so I can't really see anything. But if I had good eyesight, I could have read your documents, George.
All right, we got Irene.
Okay.
So Irene, we had a motion and a second to go into executive session for the performance evaluation of our executive director. And what and we were doing the roll call vote.
And how do you vote, Irene?
Yes. To go
Great.
into break. Okay.
So we are in executive session and the board members will now be given an invitation to join the breakout room for our discussion of the executive director's performance. And we're hopeful that that executive session will take 20 minutes or less. And then we'll come back out and consider one or more items as a result of the executive sessions.
Okay.
Again, remember, don't leave this meeting, board members. You want to just click the join breakout room when you get that little pop-up message on your screen. Jess will be sending it shortly.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I don't see it.
I'm not actually seeing her
Or
on.
do we room number 1?
I've got my message. Hopefully other folks are getting a message now. Join breakout room number 2 for the board members, please.
No. Yep, mine isn't saying that.
I was just able to join the breakout room, but there's nobody in there. I wondered if Jess was in there. She's not.
I at the bottom of my screen, it says there's icons and it says breakout rooms. I clicked on that and the pop-up says you have been assigned to breakout room 2, join breakout room. So drop your cursor down below the bottom of the screen. It's second from the right, it says breakout rooms. Click on that and it will let you go into join breakout room number 2.
I don't have that option, Tony.
I don't either.
So I just got off the phone with Jessie, and she said that if you're not receiving the invite yet, you should be. And it's the second breakout room, because if you're going to the other breakout room, there's nobody there. It's the one we were in. So Tony, you said you can jump over? Okay. Kathy, you're gone.
No, I'm not on, am I?
No, your picture's gone.
I'm trying to, I don't think I haven't gotten it unless that was just what you sent.
Okay, so we have Ralph, Irene, and Kathy. Let me see what I can do.
You do. All I have is the letters ZOOM on my screen. That's all that's there.
Now, down at the bottom, when you guys shake your cursor, do you see what the chat is and the pause and the number of attendees?
No, I don't have that.
Okay, there's 4 squares that say breakout room. If you wiggle your cursor at the bottom of the screen.
It's at the bottom of the screen and I don't see anything. It says, ask me something. And then it's got powered by ADA.
Kathy, Ralph, and Irene, did you guys get your invitation?
I don't have anything. No, I don't have an invitation.
No, I don't either.
Well, I moved you. I don't know if there's a notification that you get for that.
All it says is post attendee Zoom. And then it says getting started with Zoom. And it says, how do I join a meeting? I can't join my meeting. It's got a list of things here.
Is there a breakout rooms tab at the bottom of your screen?
I'm looking for that and I'm not seeing
little
it.
4-paned window.
So I'm using I don't know if it makes a difference. I'm using.
No, I don't have that little window.
Okay.
Still says, and it says, how can we help? And it says getting started with Zoom. How do I join a meeting? I can't join.
If you move your cursor down to the bottom of your screen, should pop up a little breakout rooms icon.
No, I don't see that anywhere here.
Okay.
Do you see any menu bar come up when you move your cursor to the bottom of the screen?
No, there's just one that says powered by, and there's this little, whatever it is, and it says ADA.
Oh, Kathy's gone.
Kathy's in there. I don't know if they're just coming in slowly.
Okay.
Ralph, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Do you see down at the bottom?
Yeah, I don't have anything down at the bottom like that.
Okay.
No, I don't have any little box either.
But you guys had gotten the.
It says Zoom in
Invites
big
that came
letters.
right up on our screen. Like, could you resend
Ralph, Ralph, I just added you again. See if you get any sort of he got it.
I
All
have-
right,
I
Irene.
have something
let
that just
me-
came up. It says, let's see if we can get you connected to your meeting so that we can get started. Can you provide which of the following issues you're coming across? And I don't know what that means by
I'm
adding
gonna-
across. There's a list of things here. I'm unable to update to Zoom. I'm having issues updating Zoom. I'm receiving an error.
Are you getting any sort of a notification, Irene? I moved you to breakout room 1 and then put you back in breakout room 2. Are you getting any sort of a notification?
There's a post attendee Zoom at the top, but that's what I'm in.
Right.
And there's that powered by ADA. And then there's a list of things here. Unable to update to Zoom. I'm having issues updating Zoom. I'm receiving an error code.
When
There's a
you
list of things here.
when you joined breakout room 1, how did you do that?
You're asking somebody who's almost illiterately.
I just
illiterate.
didn't know if you would remember how you got in there.
Something popped up on my screen that said, join breakout room 1, but I'm not seeing anything for breakout room 2 for me.
Yeah, you're not supposed to go.
Mine's just saying
So let me
Zoom.
ask a quick question, Irene, to help you. You got screens up trying to give you errors right now. Do you have little X's on those screens? You can close them. You're just seeing this Zoom thing right now.
Little X's. They would be.
Get rid of anything on your screen except for except for the cameras that we're looking at and all that.
Well, let me see what I can get, how I can get out of this. Just a moment. Okay, now I'm back at the pictures.
Now, go Jess, go ahead and zap her again because I'm afraid what she was getting was coming up behind the pop-ups.
Okay.
Irene, watch your screen and see if something comes in to click. Don't click on anything. Just wait for Jess to see if something happens.
I just sent an invitation to breakout room 2. Or moved you, I should say. If I could physically move you there, I would,
Well,
but I can't.
Well, just a moment. In behind the screen that I'm in right now where I can see you folks,
Yeah.
there is something that says Finance and Board of Directors Meeting Zoom. Here is the meeting invite.
No, that's your email you clicked on.
Okay, so.
That's your email to get. Just
Now, what about down at the bottom? Is there something there that you had mentioned something about a square before?
Yeah, if you go towards the bottom of your screen, move your cursor down there, there should be some controls that pop up, and there should be that little it looks like a little 4-paned window that says breakout rooms.
No, not, well, just a minute. Let me bring my, okay, let me bring this. No, I've lost it. Oh, okay. Now there's something that just came up on the screen. Join Zoom meeting.
Oh, they can take a number. If they come in the mail today, they can do it tomorrow.
click that.
I
just did. And it says meeting registration. And then it says topic, virtual finance committee and board of directors.
Yeah, that's not it.
That's not it. So I
close
need
that.
to, now down in blue at the bottom of the screen, it says join meeting in progress.
Yes, do that.
Okay.
See what happens.
Oh, that brings me back to the picture with you folks.
Okay, go ahead and send her another invite now, Jess.
I need all the help I can get, Mike.
Okay. Do you see anything?
Just the same pictures of you and Mike and myself.
Okay, you're probably going to have to go back
Jolie.
and pause the meeting, and
Yes,
Irene,
sir.
you're probably just going to have to skip this one.
So you want me to get out of this?
No, you just
No.
stay right here and hang out
Stay right
until they're
there.
done, okay?
Okay.
I'll just let them know. But if you do see something pop up, Irene, feel free to join.
Okay, thank you, dear.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
I don't know.
works really well.
I know, isn't it? It's very slick.
Yeah, Bob, I called you Fred because you called me
I
Kevin.
know, because I called you, I called you Kevin. I'm sorry, Kevin. I didn't mean to mix you up with Tony.
Karen, can't you control
I'm
those
sorry
two?
to you too, Tony. I'm sorry.
That was a compliment. It boosted my day.
Yeah, I can smell it from here, Kevin.
All right, well, we're just about all back. I think we're waiting for Dana. Sophie had to leave. She had a 1 o'clock meeting that she managed to push to 1:15, so she had to bow out. And we're waiting for Dana to rejoin. But in the meantime, we will take up, Ralph, he was here, he's there.
Was he? I don't,
We'll
okay.
take up item 13 on the agenda, which is a review of extension letter regarding integral capabilities for performance test protocol. And I think it would be appropriate if we have perhaps George or Mike give us, probably George, give us just a very briefest little setup for what integral capabilities are so that our participants know what it is that we're considering.
Okay, this is going back to the performance test, which was performed at the end of October of 2019 at the coastal facility in accordance with the requirements of the site lease, section 7.4. We witnessed the test, and the MRC noted that by the numbers, the facility passed the test, but there were a couple of concerns that we felt were, the MRC felt were integral to the way the facility would need to operate going forward. And until those concerns were addressed, we were concerned about an unconditioned acceptance of commercial operation. So the agreed upon response was to set some conditions on commercial operation that if they were not met by a time certain, the MRC, that the facility would revert to the requirement in the site lease, which is basically that the site lease would terminate automatically. Those conditions were not met by December 31st, 2019, which was a requirement. And so there been an extension there, and there have been several other extensions. Along the way, the extension language was written that the MRC would have the ability to basically revoke the extension and terminate the site lease at its discretion with notice. And so the point was to keep the facility on a very short leash, to recognize that more time was needed to achieve certain objectives or demonstrate certain capabilities, but if those capabilities would not or could not be objective, that the MRC retains its right to terminate on short notice. So this is yet again another extension of the integral capabilities. It's done in the context, I mean, I think there's an outside date on it, but the context is number one, the MRC only has so much patience for extensions. The date should not be interpreted as an unlimited amount of time or even as an amount of time that's provided. The MRC will only provide extensions to the extent that there continues to be progress in moving towards a solution, which the MRC is monitoring very carefully. On the other hand, the MRC doesn't extend, then the site lease terminates automatically, and that's an outcome that at this point, if the MRC votes to extend, that would be avoided. For now, the MRC would still retain the right to terminate the site lease. Basically, it was a 3 days notice, John. And so this is to be seen as a mechanism that avoids or immediate termination of the site lease for the duration of the extension, but the MRC returns the right to terminate basically on 3 days notice within that period. And then my understanding is that the outside date was set in accordance with a quarterly meeting of the MRC, so there wouldn't need to be a special meeting just to reconsider this issue again if it would be needed. But again, it's not to be interpreted as a blanket license to take a certain amount of time, but as giving the MRC flexibility over a period of time whether to continue on as long as progress is being made. So I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you, George. And I think earlier at some point, Bob had made the good point that, the longer that this continues on in this resolution phase, that, the likelihood of MRC being able to stay together and keep its members together and provide the waste, which is what makes that plant go, becomes less likely. So the faster we can come to a resolution, the better. I think you're right about 3 months being the outside date that we're looking at, to have a solution in place certainly is correct. So, so with that, I think we need a motion. And if I understood you correctly, we're looking for a motion for a 3-month extension. Is that how you would phrase it?
Yeah, perhaps a suggested language.
Thank you.
Could be that the board authorize the executive director to enter into an extension agreement regarding the integral capabilities deadline for performance test protocol. Further extend the deadline to, I'm going to pick October 22nd, 2020. That happens to be the next day after the October 21st quarterly meeting of MRC.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll, please, Jonathan?
Yes. Kevin?
Yes.
Irene?
Yes.
Dana?
He was there. He may have
Dana's
gone
not
away
here?
again.
Okay.
I think he moved. I think he was here and then now he's gone.
Okay. I'll come back if I can see him there. Bob?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Sophie?
So you want me to?
I think she's
Sophie,
gone.
she had to
gone.
leave. Yeah.
Sorry.
But she wanted us to say that she was in favor of this.
Tony?
Yes.
And Karen?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. With that, we move on to other items as a result of the executive sessions. And I believe we do have a motion as a result of the executive session for the performance evaluation of our executive director. If anybody would be willing to make a motion.
I will make a motion that we adjust Mike's salary by 3%. That, in accordance with his contract, we add a 4th week of vacation and increase the amount that can be carried from 160 hours to 200 hours. And that, should we decide to dissolve the MRC or the executive director position, we will provide him 12 months of severance.
Or notice.
Yes, or notice. That is correct. Thank you, Kathy.
Yep. Mike, oh, excuse me. That covers it though. Did I get it right?
I think so, and I just wanted to clarify that the pay adjustment would be retroactive to July 1st, just so we're consistent, and since his contract started on a July 1st date.
I agree.
Okay, so with that motion, do we have a second?
Second.
So Jonathan, if you would call the roll.
Kevin?
Yes.
Irene?
Yes.
Dana? I don't think Dana's on here. Bob?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Sophie? Oh, Sophie's not here.
As we said earlier, though, Sophie wanted us to tell the folks that she is in favor of this.
Thanks, Tony. And Tony?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes. All right, very good. And that is all that we had in terms of items that the board was going to consider. That brings us to public comment. Again, our hope is that if anybody has any public comments, it would be limited to those 2 items that we just took up. And I don't know, Jess, if you have any indications of people who want to make comments or have received any feedback.
I have no further comments from the public.
Okay, very good. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion
to
Second.
Got a motion and a second, and we're going to consider it a vote unless doubted. Thank you all very much for your time. I know it was very extended, and the board members especially, and our staff and consultants, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Got a lot accomplished, and thanks
Did.
again to our executive director for his excellent leadership.
Absolutely.
Look forward to
Thank
seeing you on the next call, the next meeting that we have. Thank you.
thank you all. Bye.
Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, Mike.